push, push. Right. All being well, we can hear me. And
hopefully you can hear me.
you've gone super pixelated. So Jan is in
So have you.
114. There we go. I'm looking good.
No, something's going wrong with internet. I blame you. It was working fine a minute ago. Hello, Munzer. How are you?
Excellent. We can be heard. Good evening, everybody. We are going to take a look at old school graphics today in new games. And what do we mean by that?
We mean, hello, everybody. How are you? We mean, there's been a move for a while now to go into sort of retro style gaming. It's not just roguelikes, it's a lot of things. The obvious example would be something like Minecraft, but a bunch of other games came out with it, which I find very interesting because when I was young, the push was always for photorealism. All through the 90s, all the games magazines were talking about how one day games would be photorealistic. And the moment we hit that point, it's no longer suitable for a small development team.
Yes.
So you get these incredible games with like old school graphics, but they play very differently than you'd think.
So one of the things that is, I think, really critical is if you are a small team or an individual making a game, going for the lower graphical bar means that you can end up developing a game and actually releasing it.
Although we say that, it's still a lot of work.
Oh, definitely a lot of work.
So let's do some hellos. We've got Munzer. Hello, Munzer. We've got Vertex Rage. Hello, Vertex Rage. Don't be too angry. Is it Rage? Yeah. Don't be too angry at the vertices. When they're on their own, they're fine. It's just when you get too many of them together, they start, they're a bit facey.
Oh, but
we've got Gerard. We've got Mindstammer. They're just not normal. Look on your face. Okay, so this all came about because Michael played Terraria for the first time in ages.
I thought I was getting turned off. Told off then because you're like, Michael.
No.
Oh, but what have I done?
Michael was playing Terraria or Terraria. Michael was playing Terraria. And he said to me, it's weird because I expected it to be a really simple, childish game, but it's really not. So some games we'd like to talk about today. Terraria, Starbound, Noita, probably Streets of Rogue, and why don't we add in, there was another one that I just had in my mind a second ago, but it's gone.
Starview Valley. Is it Starview
That was
Valley?
The one.
Yes.
Yes.
That's one that I've actually played in the past, and why I thought Terraria would be Noddy, essentially. It was
Noddy will only make sense for people who grew up in the UK or France.
Simplistic and simple, basically.
Yeah, Noddy is a series of children's books.
So yeah, I
hello, Roderick.
I've since settled into the game. I played it for a couple of hours because I think you really do need to do that in order to get an idea about the game mechanics and everything else. Jumping in initially, one of my first thoughts with Terraria was, in fact, I remember the very first time I played it, there's like a big eyeball boss. And I happened to come across that on my first playthrough. And I was like, this game's a bit hardcore. That's one.
Well, it's interesting because it seems to be riding off the back of sort of the whole series of games inspired by Minecraft, right? Yeah. Minecraft tapped into something. Minecraft wasn't the first game to do what it was doing. In fact, it wasn't the first game that Notch released that was doing what it was doing. Infiniminer was doing what Minecraft was doing before then. But Minecraft really sort of tapped into something.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that the concept of let's take Minecraft and make it two-dimensional feels like it should be simpler. But they've added a lot of complexity and depth into it.
You also have, certainly I've played far more Minecraft than I have done any of the other games. And I found that I was projecting what I'd learned in one game onto another, which is quite common if you start to get the hang of certain tropes. Like all survival games, what's the first thing you do? Punch a tree.
I mean, in fairness, it's the first thing I do when I go outside anyway.
That's why there are no trees left in your village.
And why my hands don't work.
And there are just floating foliage high up.
So yeah, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking specifically about survival games.
No.
But I do want to ask you a question. Would you say that Terraria is a survival game?
I don't know yet. It feels like more of an exploration game because it's got a mission. I think it's got missions rather than just survive. And you could say the same about Minecraft. The idea is to beat the end
I
boss.
mean, there are plenty of survival games that have missions, but
Yeah,
for some reason, Terraria and I would say Starbound don't feel like that. You do have to survive. There is food, there is
yeah.
water, but
I don't think you have to eat in
I don't know.
Terraria, but you do in Starbound. It's a mechanic
You do
they
in
added.
Starbound.
Yeah. And it's an interesting mechanic to add because it can be really frustrating. I remember the first time I played. We are now talking about survival games. I remember the first time I played No Man's Sky, and I landed on a hostile world and just died because of thirst, because I couldn't find anything because it was a desert world or something along those lines, which was not much fun.
I mean, I've done that with Minecraft seeds where you type one in, it's like, and I'm on a tiny island with one cactus and a creeper.
Not even a tree to punch. What
No,
is going
just a
on?
um, so before we get like too into it, why don't you explain to people like a little elevator pitch? What is Terraria?
Ah, is it so? I've only played
Because we have
like
got your screenshots for them.
an hour and a half of the game. I would initially I would describe it as a almost a 2D Minecraft, just so people would get the idea about what the game looks like. Because
Right.
ultimately, looks are the first thing you see when
So
you're
you can
playing a game.
explore, you can dig ridiculously far down. There's lots
Yes,
of different
yeah,
biomes. There's lots of different threats.
and the
There's things you can
biomes
uncover.
now the biomes appear to be difficulty. So they appear to be
Mhm.
gated with difficulty, which isn't something that Minecraft is. So the first thing I did was went off exploring and rapidly died to some
Yeah,
hideous vampire werewolf type beasts, which actually sounded quite horrible as well. Um, as in
I mean, I've
a
not
good
played Terraria in a
sound.
very long time, but because
Yeah,
it's quite an old game now.
it took a while to get the hang of the building mechanic as well, because I expected there to maybe be roof pieces with the fact that you can make individual floors and stuff. And when I put a floor over my head, I was still getting rained on, and it took me a while to get the whole premise of the game. That the idea is to build a small village or interconnected rooms with a table and light source. I think walls, table, and a light source. And so for ages, I was looking for a bed. That's a
Mm.
standard trope, but you need somewhere to sleep. But I I I didn't Google it because I was very keen on having the raw experience and to
Yeah.
see what the mechanic is. How do you work it out? In the end, I did go to that little dude. There's a guy right at the very beginning. He says, "Hey, if you want to find out what to do or you're stuck, just ask me." So I just kept clicking the hints button. I was like, "Oh, okay." I got to the bit where it says, "Make yourself a village and people will come." I was like, "Oh, okay." That bit wasn't clear, and the only way I think I could have ever found that out was to accidentally build a table, chairs, and a sealed room with a light source.
I mean, my memories of Terraria involve lots of grappling hooks, giant boss fights, and effectively um, 7 Days to Die style blood moons. I know it's 7 Days to Die is a later game and it's
Yeah.
not that, but that kind of thing. Um, and neighbor's dog barking. I I do recall getting a little frustrated with the fact that it felt like it was all about boss battles, and I think that was the point I stopped playing. Um, it is surprisingly fun. It is surprisingly difficult, especially
Yes.
on high difficulty levels.
That's what caught me off guard significantly was the difficulty. And that's where you and I had that conversation about, well, it kind of harks back to old school gaming where games were just difficult. Not all
Sometimes
games.
even unfinishable. Yeah. I mean, the famous example is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game, which cannot be finished, as far as I'm aware, unless someone has managed it. Like, it's just impossible.
I remember that getting pretty difficult later on. I think I was playing it on my Amiga back in the day. But yeah, it was
Hmm.
it was definitely a difficult game. Um and I think the notion of like waypoints and checkpoints, obviously with some of the older games, when you died, that was it. You're dead. You'd have to start right from the beginning again. At least,
Yep.
and Terraria gives you at least gives you the options on your difficulty levels, whether you're a casual playthrough, whether you're just going to drop some coins, or whether you drop everything that you're carrying. And so we get this kind of modernization of being able to progress at a ability level that you're comfortable with. But I do like having
Yeah,
that slider.
and part of that is a technological difference, right? I mean, there was a time where you couldn't just let people save whenever they wanted because
I mean, memory
you were
cards on
loading from a
consoles were
floppy
a
disk.
thing.
Right. But even I mean, I remember playing games in like 1982, and you would get a code that you could type in and start at that level because it just wasn't feasible. The alternative was you'd put in a blank cassette tape and save,
Wow.
which some games did. But as technology evolved, that sort of became less important.